Hey all, Ron here from Military Images with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. You never know where you're going to encounter the Civil War. Take, for example, a couple weeks ago, my wife and I attended a wedding in Charlotte, North Carolina. Friends of the family on my wife's side, but folks I've known for years. Beautiful ceremony, followed by an equally beautiful reception. We sat at a table with senior members of the family. I sat next to the great uncle of the bride, Scott Welton, struck up a conversation. He told me about his passion for life insurance, still selling at age 85. I admired his pluck. I admired his love for what he does. Had a good conversation. He asked me what I did for a living, and I told him. And so he started telling me about his Civil War ancestor. And considering where he was from, I expected he'd be telling me about a Confederate soldier from North Carolina. I was surprised when he told me about his Union ancestor who served in an Ohio regiment. He went on to tell me that he had had 143 letters written by the soldier. They had since donated to the University of North Carolina. And then he invited me to come over his house the next day to see transcripts of the letters and some other interesting items that he had. So I dutifully went over and saw this relic, piece of wood with a musket ball in it. There's a note, as you can see on it, and the note says, quote, taken from a tree on the battlefield of Rasaca, Georgia, where every third man was killed or wounded of the 103rd Ohio Infantry, of which CB Welton was a member. Take a look at some of the other views. Here's a back view of this piece of wood. You can see the lead bullet coming out the backside. It's another view from the side, the other side. There's a view. You can see the conical shape of the lead stuck in the piece of tree. There's another view of that. So pretty amazing relic. So question becomes, who is CB Welton, Scott Welton's ancestor? Well, he's Chauncey Brunson Welton. He's 18 years old in the fall of 1862 when he mustered into Company I of the 103rd Ohio. Proved a good soldier. As you can see from the note, he was very much in the Battle of Resaca, part of the Atlanta campaign, more or less a drawn battle, heavy casualties on both sides. A couple months after that, he got his corporal's stripes, went on to serve in the Carolinas campaign, mustered out in June of 1865 in Raleigh, North Carolina. Survived his war experience, went home, married, started a family, later moved to Wisconsin, became prominent in state politics as a legislator, and died in 1908. Lived a good life. Now, what about Welton Corporal? Call him Corporal Welton as his title that he mustered out with. Corporal Welton and the 103rd at Resaca. Well, let me read to you the official battle report. It's dated in the field near Big Shanty, Georgia, by a captain, the senior captain, Philip Hayes. Here's what Captain Hayes has to say about his regiment, Welton's regiment, at the Battle of Resaca. Sir, on the morning of the 14th of May, 1864, the 103rd Regiment, Ohio Volunteer Infantry, 363 strong, commanded by Captain W.W. Hutchinson, was ordered with the 63rd Indiana, 24th Kentucky, and 5th Tennessee to make an advance. The 103rd was on the right of the rear line. We marched out of the woods where we were camped and came to an open field on the opposite side of which was the enemy. We were made aware of the enemy's presence and whereabouts by his firing, which he began as soon as he saw us. This is about 12. As we came near the place where the enemy was posted, his firing became more violent and destructive. Yet we persevered a good line and moved forward over this open field with coolness and determination. On the right of the enemy's position was a hill behind which we were ordered to shelter ourselves until further orders. This we did, lying on our faces to avoid the shot and shell which whistled terribly over our heads. Our loss in coming over this open field consisted in that of Captain J.T. Philpott killed with shell and 1 or 2 wounded. We lay under this hill about an hour and were then ordered forward. The order the regiment obeyed unflinchingly, although under a withering fire. We passed 2 lines of the enemy's rifle pits, and here came upon the top of a hill, which was taken with the enemy's rifles and cannon. Here we met with our severest loss, as the bullets, shell, grape, and canister fell around us thick as hail. Just as we got over the top of the hill, Captain Hutchinson was mortally wounded. He was borne off the field and died soon after. This left me in command. As soon as we came to the top of this hill, we were in sight of the enemy and began to open upon him with our musketry. The boys, sheltering themselves as best they could, fought most vigorously for about 2 hours. At this time, our ammunition gave out. This left us in a critical situation. We managed to supply some of our men by rifling the cartridge boxes of the dead and wounded. Others were obliged to go unsupplied, yet we could not leave our position, for such all act would break our lines and might prove fatal to us. Hence, I was under the necessity of keeping the regiment in this position for an hour or more under a terrible fire, and without the means of returning it. At last, the 4th Corps came to our relief, and our regiment was withdrawn. We fell back in good order and started for the rear to replenish our stock of ammunition. Our loss in this regiment was 81, 7 killed, 74 wounded. Several of the wounded have since died, but how many I know not. I can say of the officers and men of the regiment that they all did nobly. Not a man or officer shrank from his duty, but each stood to his post unflinchingly. The 2 captains who were killed fell manfully discharging the duties of their positions, each winning, by his heroic actions and noble death, glory unfading, and a name that will never die. So, there's the after action report. Now, I mentioned that Corporal Welton left by 143 letters. I dug into the transcripts looking for his description of the Battle of Resaca, the battle in which he got this piece of wood, sawed this piece of wood out of a tree. And I found it. Headlined Cartersville, Georgia, May 21st, 1864, a week after the battle. Here it is. Dear parents, it has been a long time since I have had the opportunity of writing to you, for no mail has been allowed to go north. And even if it had, I have not the time to write a letter in the last 20 days. This date finds me about 100 miles south of Chattanooga and within 30 miles of Atlanta. You have probably heard that we have had some very hard fighting to do. Our regiment was not engaged at Buzzard's Roost, although we was under the enemy's fire, being held as a reserve. From Buzzard Roost, our corps was sent around to the right to make a move on the enemy's left. The distance was about 20 miles, and as the road was only about 2 or 3 miles in the rear of the line, we was not out of hearing of the continual cannonading and musketry which was kept up on the whole length of the line. Although no general attack was made on the morning of the 14th, we found ourselves in front of no very agreeable sight. Across an opening about 3/4 of a mile, across lay the lion in his den, apparently asleep. But for all the calm that reigned around those fields, we well knew that the slightest rustle of a leaf would arouse him at once. But every man at once realized the work before us, and forcing away thoughts of those at home, coolly waited the order forward. At last, the signal gun told that all was ready. The first division was on the left, the third, on the center, and the second division on the right, in front of our division. And as it happened, in front of our brigade, on a hill, stood the rebel fort with 3 lines of rifle pits in front. And we well knew if this was taken, that it would be at a high price. As we moved forward across the opening, the silence at once was broken, and the bursting shell told at once that the work of death had commenced through the ill management of General Judah commanding the second division. His men were repulsed and drove back, so that it threw the whole fire of the fort and the 2 masked batteries upon our brigade. But the second brigade knew no such word as retreat when once engaged, and the rebels soon yielded the first line of works to the powerful influence of our bayonets. And after about an hour's steady firing, we succeeded in driving them out of the second line also, and thus the conflict continued until after dark. After we had taken the second line of works, our ammunition was gone, and for half an hour we were obliged to stand with fixed bayonets until relief came. As I came from the field, I helped carry Ed Wise off the field and took care of him until I could get him in the ambulance. And so that he would go to the field hospital, he was wounded in the top of the head very dangerously. We lost about 80 men killed, wounded, and missing. Company I only 7 wounded and none killed. The fight continued the most of the next day, although not so severe. When I got time and opportunity, I will give you full particulars of the whole campaign, which I cannot do today, only to say that the rebels are retreating as fast as possible, and we are in hot pursuit. Our division had the advance yesterday and skirmished with them all day. After 20 days of marching and fighting without hardly one night's rest, we find ourselves forward and crush this wicked rebellion as soon as possible. This morning, our division had orders to do their washing and get ready for a 20 days march. I received a letter from home this morning with Uncle L's. I will write again the opportunity. My love to all. But I must bring this to a close, hoping that if we are not permitted to meet again while here on earth, we may, when parting is no more. Your son, Chauncey. So there you have Chauncey Welton's letter home to his parents, describing the Battle of Resaca, the piece of wood. He didn't mention it in his letter, but he took it with him, probably carried it in his knapsack, may have sent it home at some point. I have to go through the rest of the letters and find out if he does mention it. So you have this, and of course, the after action report of the senior captain of the regiment, which the basics of which line up nicely with Chauncey's letter. Now, those of you who watch these videos regularly know that instead of having a picture of a relic on the screen, I normally have a photograph of a soldier. And this is where I could use your help. I'm looking for a wartime image of Chauncey Brunson Welton of the 103rd Ohio Infantry. If you have one, if you know where it is, let me know. I hope to hear from you soon. Take care. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research.